Okay, I'm going to give a very short report so that hopefully we leave our time for our next item, which is, honestly, the board saver, which is over the microphone, and that's because it's the greatest opportunity for us to interact with the community as a whole. So with that, I'm going to go over a few things. I'm going to talk very briefly about fees and kind of what's going on there, since that's been a topic of discussion. Give you a bit of an update on our work on governance and some thank yous, and of course, a reminder to vote. Next slide, please. So fees, we get letters. And as an example, for instance, we've gotten letters about an IPv6 fee adjustment. Just some people ask kind of what's going on with that. So there's always a challenge when it comes to fees. We have to look at it from a variety of items. So for instance, on this item, while we understand there's some organizations that are fee challenged or have indicated that the fees are a challenge, we look at other regions and we don't see the same situation happening. And we also have to consider, even though it's always great to offer fee waivers, it's always great to try, and we do, by the way, look to lower fees wherever possible. Dropping that category impacts us by $325,000 a year. Or if we rearrange, and that's if we just simply lowered the 2X category. And that's a significant drop in our ability to execute on, given our budget. Our treasurer would then get concerned. And even if we then, or we could look at rejigging the sizings, which would obviously dramatically drop the fee decrease, but it starts to complicate and put lots of exceptions in the fee schedule. Next slide, please. So as just a general item, we guide ourselves by the strategic plan that we adopted 3 years, and we've asked staff to perform equitable cost recovery across the customer community. So we do try and make sure that we're being equitable in fees, and we've identified, several inequities. For instance, end user versus RSP. There's wildly different service pricing here, but similar services. The IPv6 fee adjustment, things like legacy fees. And we also have to contend that with it. We're always being asked at these microphones, at least in person, people want to see things done faster. They want more features. We get a ton more letters and suggestions for, and mostly staff, of course, take that. If you look at the suggestion, there's always a backlog of feature requests and suggestions. And that's just what comes from the more immediate community. That doesn't include what we get in our surveys with our customers and interactions with staff. Next slide, please. So the board is trying to take a bit more step. We're concerned with the former approach, which worked in the early days when we were still, ARIN was a young organization, which was much more a patchwork. Just adjust this fee here and raise that and waive that and do that. We're trying to just take a step back and do holistic. And before we start saying fees, we're making use of the increased capacity that we have in staff in the finance department. We've recently brought on, of course, Brian Kirk, which you heard about as the CFO. And we also have John Sweeting, who's come on. We have a product manager who he's brought on as well. And we're starting to define our service catalog, and we've had some great discussions. That work, of course, is being done at the staff level, will be clear, but from a board perspective, we've now started to see the early gains from those additions, where we're starting to get better modeling on, what are the costs? Because we also worry about stuff about being wildly successful. If we're pricing certain tiers under our cost and we suddenly got an influx, for instance, if we did lower the fees and we suddenly got thousands upon thousands more IPv6 applications, well, that would be great for IPv6 deployment, and might not be so great for ARIN's bottom line and the ability for it to cost, because obviously as our workload goes up, so do our costs. So our hope is to review and have a fee framework in 2021. My thanks to Nancy on top of everything else she's been doing for the board and the finance skills that she's brought. She's been leading that with staff and the FinCom. The FinCom honestly has been a very busy committee this year. And our hope is that we can bring a new framework, making sure that we have that equitable recovery, avoiding the patchwork and understanding all impacts of any fee change, ensuring that we're operating in a fiscally responsible manner. That again being that if we do start pushing some of our costs below what it does cost us to deliver, what happens that. We also want to allow flexibility for new offerings. We have now a product development team, and we have a lot of requests from community members for specific offerings, and we want to continue to look into those. And we want to make sure that we can do those flexibly. So if we can develop a framework that will allow staff to execute on those faster. And most importantly, what we hear a lot is that members really appreciate the predictability and simplicity. An overly complex fee structure, you know, there was one time I think fees were looking at another RIR, you had to use a logarithmic equation to figure out your fees. That was not well received. And that a lot of you appreciate that from a budgeting perspective, you have some degree of predictability in your fees. So please look forward to hearing more in 2021 on that. The FinCom will be finishing off its work this year, and then it will start to be on our board calendar for next year. And please keep the fee feedback coming. And thank you for that prediction on the next slide. Okay, speeding along here, governance. Just a quick update. In January, we established the governance working group, which was chaired by Nancy Carter, who you just spoke with, has Peter Harrison and Catherine Middleton on it. We really brought that to give a fresh perspective, some people who have not been maybe as involved in communities long, but were able to really have a fresh perspective. We've done that based on a lot of our internal strategic discussions as a board and feedback that we receive from the community to try and, you know, continue to improve the effectiveness of the board, at the same time ensuring we have accountability and transparency where possible. So as a whole, we're trying to look at the entire structure, and we are focused just on the board. At some point, we might look elsewhere, such as the advisory council and elsewhere, but we wanted to try and keep that because we were hoping for them to report back within a year. Next slide, please. The committee was authorized and did bring in an external assistance. So we, via RFP, brought in an organization as Baker Tilly, and they've been helping facilitate these discussions with the governance working group. The sessions are really just trying to understand where we can have early gains, where we can maybe make long-term structural goals. And the overriding point, next slide please, is to increase board effectiveness, to make us a more highly functional board. And this is not to say that the board is not effective today, but I think the current board, just like the organization, believes in that even though we've set a bar, you can always move the bar higher. We've got to be growing. We've got to be trying to get to the next level. There's always things to learn and room to improvement. And a lot of our work was founded based on our desire to see, I think you heard this from even the candidates earlier today, that there's we need to see a good mix of people around the table, because we've been strengthened when we bring in people who do have that experience, who do know the industry well, very key and always required, but also finding people who have not been in our environment as long has been helpful. Bringing in different skill sets has also been helpful. As a reminder, the board has published some guidance on that it felt on this, some early thoughts. It's the guidance to the nomination committee, but this is a public document that you can find on the ARIN election website. And I'd encourage all the members to read it, because we would be happy to take your feedback on it. You know, and from our perspective, it is trying to find that right balance group. And the way, you know, Canadian, making a hockey analogy a little bit, is, you know, you can have the best pro players in the world, but you wouldn't put your starting lineup as 6 goalies or 6 right wingers or something. You know, you just won't have the most effective. You need to make sure we have the right skills at all the different positions. And we look for the community support and finding that way, while still, and never lost in us, making sure that we have strong community accountability. It's something that's very important to us. And that's just as we try and become a more effective board, really focus on strategic guidance and trying to stay out of staff. Staff have grown now to a size, you know, the staff have a great amount of skills, and we want to let them be able to run the organization on a day-to-day. Next slide, please. So that kind of finishes off the governance topic. What else have we been doing? We've been dealing with the pandemic as a board, and it's been a challenge, but we've tried to adapt. So for instance, we've had to do virtual strategic planning this year. We really have always enjoyed getting together once a year, normally in August, and being able to lock ourselves in the room for a few days and battle that out. That wasn't possible this time. The good thing on strategic planning virtually is that we've been able to spread it out a bit, which has allowed for a little more interactivity. We had some good discussions, and we're still doing a bit of our strategic planning this year, and we'll be continuing throughout the calendar year. We continue to focus on developing risk registers with the staff to make sure that we have good visibility into that, understand and make sure that that work is being done well, working with staff to support them in the technical debt mitigation. And I think we're very happy with the work that we've seen. And my thanks to the entire staff for that. And on some other stuff, we continue to look at the grant selection program. I welcome your feedback now that we've had 2 cycles as a community. If this is still something that you think as a community we should be supporting. And we're also hoping to roll out a trustee professional development plan, because just as we stated, we always want to be learning, and we're trying to support trustees where they have certain skill sets and not others, but would like to work on it. So that's something we've put a framework on this year. We hope to be a little bit more down that road, but unfortunately the pandemic has slowed a lot of that down. Take a breath. So with that, I'd like to just do a few thank yous. So first, a thank you to Chris Woodfield for his term on the ARIN. It's not a goodbye, to my understanding. I know Chris has, had put a lot of time into the AC, but has decided to take a step back for maybe a short time just to deal with other things. And we really appreciate, Chris, your time and effort. I'm glad to hear you're still going to be involved in the community, and look forward to your continued participation in that. I ask you all to give a round to Chris on that. Already mentioned, of course, is Val Winkleman. I think both John and Nancy have said many of the words need to be said. I also, just on behalf of the board, thank her. She supported that department for many years. She's always been an advocate and very strong and collaborative with the board. And I personally thank her because she's helped me through getting a lot of finance issues, always very responsive, always able to help me get myself organized. And I really appreciate it, Val. Thanks for all your efforts. And with that, I thank you. And I, again, wish you well in your future endeavors. And lastly, a thank you, not a goodbye, would be to Steve Ryan. Steve, again, is our general counsel until the end of the year, at which point he'll be transitioning on to Michael. I'd certainly like to take a few moments to thank Steve again for all his efforts in this role. I'm excited and very happy to hear that you are, again, happy to stick with us and support us in other roles. Steve has navigated us over his many years through many efforts. I wasn't there in the beginning, and I know that he helped us initially when he came in as a very specific, to do some very specific work for ARIN, and it just clearly evolved into the more general counsel position. I actually met Steve in 2004, and I was just an AC member back then. And he was always very giving of his time, very knowledgeable guy. He has through our board. And of course, his work just doesn't stick on the board. He's support the staff as well, but on the board, he's always been not only just our lawyer, and he's a fantastic lawyer, and we are privileged to have him serve in that role, but he's also been a great advisor to the board, both in terms of just his political knowledge, the ability to synthesize complex technical problems and put them in communications that are good for other stakeholders, such as governments or policymakers and such. He's certainly is from a person, is the person I most know that can take a very complex thing and distill it down to its any problem down to its key facts. Certainly, and of course, how is it hard to not love his love of hockey as well? So he's really an honorary Canadian from my perspective, even though his hockey team Capitals questionable there. So Steve, if we were in person, I would hope to raise your banner with your number up to the ceiling so we could retire it. But we can't do it there. But I'd ask you all to take a moment and raise a quick glass. Oh, sorry, virtual thing, a glass to Steve, and thank Steve for all his years in this service. Good luck to Michael, of course, as well, who will be succeeding him. Some big shoes to fill. And thank you again, Steve, for being not just a colleague but a good friend. Steve, I don't know if you have any words or saying. I see you appearing. You're welcome to say anything if you'd like.
I just want to thank you, Paul. That was remarkably generous. And you and John, the board, and all of my friends at ARIN, thank you for your patience in teaching me the technology game. And thanks again for all of the years. And I look forward to having a glass with all of you in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. We all raise a glass. Okay, next slide. I end this presentation by reminding you to vote. Vote for candidates for the advisory council. Vote for candidates for the board of trustees. please read about the candidates. You can see the videos if you missed them earlier. We have the guidance on the website. You can go and show your support, but most importantly, vote for my friends to the south. It's good practice. I hear you have to do this potentially again in a few weeks as well. So always good to get in there. Vote early, vote once, and then voting opens in 24 minutes or so and closes on October 30th with that.